put me out on the dance floor. No, don't. My dancing ability, I avoid the dance floor at weddings until my wife harasses me into it sometimes. Because my rhythmic abilities were not well developed during fundamental motor skill time period. I didn't learn to dance until adulthood, and even that's a stretch to be able to say I learned to dance at adulthood. I lose my confidence. I haven't made it through proficiency barrier. I'm not sure there are any transitional activities for my level of dancing. There probably is. I don't want to dance, right? Well, if you don't have good fundamental motor skills, if you can't throw, catch, gallop, leap, do you want to play basketball? Do you want to play soccer? If you can't swing with coordination, do you want to golf? See, we don't want to. And it all comes back down to here. Some theorists would say it comes down to here. I tend to believe that it's beyond that and into reaching maturity, because most of this emerges quite strongly genetically on a genetic timetable and reaches maturity through maturation. This stuff here, we start to venture into an area that doesn't reach full maturity just through maturation, but through instruction and experience. I love this model of motor development, but there's more to it. Matter of fact, if you've got it printed out in front of you, hold that up for me, will you please? That's a nightmare. How do you look at something like that and go, what? That's awful. Well, let's keep putting it in one piece at a time, because you can see there's so much more. And here's what I want to have in my physical representation. If indeed this was, you leave a flower pot out in the wind and what happens? Blows over. Why? Narrow base of support. I try to give it a broad base of support, but this broad base of support really needs to have some stanchions coming up from it to really prove that it can hold up this thing that's ever getting wider and wider. Maturational influences are very strong as represented by the thick black lines during the reflexive and rudimentary skill phases. Environmental influences have some but little impact. In other words, you don't wake up in the morning and say, well, I'm 12 days old now, and well, I hope Mom has some really great reflexive lessons for me. Nor does a mom wake up and think, I really got to reinforce that Babinski reflex. It doesn't work that way. The more that we stimulate the Babinski reflex, the stronger it gets. No, it just is there. And so we know that there is some influence, but not a lot. Rudimentary skills, movement to walking behavior. For example, a study was done in India in the 1940s. And it wasn't a controlled study, so please help me, or please understand this. You can't do deprivation controlled studies, can you? In reality, human subjects research foundations would never let you do this. We would say, no, Tommy's a twin. So let's take, actually, isn't somebody in here a twin? Jackie, you're a twin, right? So, and Stephen's a twin. We've got, so let's do this. Jackie's twin. Jackie, we're going to feed you every day, and we're going to not feed your sister, and we're going to see the impact of that on growth and development. No, not going to happen, is it? Or we're actually at the point with twin studies where we typically don't even do a lot of enhancement stuff and call it good research. We have to be really careful, because if it's perceived as deprivation, it can be considered immoral. So what research do we have to support that there is some sort of environmental influence on, let's say, walking behavior? Going backward in time, villages close to each other with similar genetic makeup of the children. One village did not backboard their children. Another village did backboard their children. The mothers would get up in the morning, they would put their babies under age 1 on a backboard, a literal board, and bind them, wrap them to it, so that when they went out to the fields to work, they could plop them up against something, and the babies would be under control. They could continue their work. Makes a lot of sense. We kind of do that as we put them in these front packs now. I was going to say backpack, but these front packs that we have, these swaddling packs, and allows you to have your hands free and you get work done. But there's a village that did this approach and a village who did an approach similar to what you would expect, where they let the children play around their feet. Which village children develop walking behavior sooner? This one. If you don't get an opportunity, if there's deprivation from the ability to strengthen your body for walking behavior, then you'd see some setback in it. So we do know that environmental influences are there even in something that genetically emerges quite naturally. If my memory serves me right, if we go back and retest those kids at age 5, their motor development is at pretty similar levels. So there's a catch-up phenomenon, which I will highlight later on in this class as well. So rudimentary, as we go up the model, do you see what's happening?
More environmental.
Yeah, we get many more environmental influences compared to maturation. Let's recognize genetic factors do play a big role still, even as we get up into sports and games, but not like environmental influences do. A much greater influence and support from it. So as we recognize that, for example, do you think I would make a great linebacker in football? That was pretty sardonic, wasn't it? Probably not. I mean, I'm at the heaviest point in my life, and I'm like 165 pounds right now. I'm a monster compared to what I used to be. So, no, there's some genetic factor that might keep me from that. How about Matt Neal? I want to be a center on the basketball team. Do they call them centers anymore? I think they give them numbers now. Do they? They call them centers? I want to be a center on the basketball team. Am I really genetically made for that? You should see my leaping ability. I might have told you I touched the net once. I jumped. So I think I'm up for that. No, we recognize that there are some maturational influences, but most of them are environmental. Because you still have Spud Webb, not too long ago that played the game. I'm going way back. Some of you are going, I have never heard of Spud Webb. He won the slam dunk contest, didn't he? Wasn't he 5'8"? That kid was a monster dunker. He could jump. Did they call him Spiderweb or Spudweb? Yeah, I got that right. So we're recognizing that there's contributions of both maturation and environment. Now, in your definition of motor development, we said environment, maturation, and the demands of the task. This might be the best way for you to understand that. As we move upward in the developmental model, the demands in our affective domain and the input of the affective domain will impact your reaching maturation as you move up the model. The same thing with the cognitive. The cognitive demands on reflexes, you don't have to study them. You don't have to observe them and say, oh, now I get it. Now I'll have the Babinski reflex. It is not tied to the cognitive very tightly. That's a bit of a misnomer. I do have to say this to you. If a child is born with Down syndrome, we tend to end up, as we get to the point of testing, around 2 standard